Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my first game preview of the season. I cannot believe that I get to say that to you all here again. It has been such a long offseason. Every offseason seems long, but especially when you have a program that has so much excitement, but so many unknowns, so much potential, but so little proven potential on the field. This is going to be such an exciting season. There's a lot of expectations around Boise State, obviously coming in as a top 25 program, the only non-Power 4 program in the top 25, and Boise State is going to open up the season with all of those expectations on Thursday the 28th at 3:30 p.m. Mountain Time on ESPN. Boise State is favored versus USF in this game by 8.5 points, and as previously stated, coming in at the number 25 spot. Obviously, this is a massive game for a multitude of reasons. Just being the first game of the season makes it a massive game. However, this game is going to have major implications on not just Boise State and USF, but on the outcome of the playoff race for either conference. Regardless of whether Boise State or USF are in contention at the end of the season, this matchup is going to have major implications for the American Athletic Conference and the Mountain West. Yes, Boise State in the Mountain West for one final year. This is the last one. But this is going to have major implications for both of these conferences coming down the final stretch. Traditionally, the Mountain West and American Athletic Conference have been the two teams that have been pitched head-to-head against each other. And now you have an opportunity to pitch the projected number one team in the Mountain West versus a program that is certainly on the rise and, while maybe not projected to be number one, is projected to be a contender. This matchup is going to become a head-to-head determiner down the road, not just for Boise State and USF, but for many other teams in both conferences that are fighting for that final slot into the playoffs. So this is going to be a massive game. There's going to be a ton of media attention on it, not just because it's Boise State, not just because it's top 25, but because of all the implications resting. So let's get right into previewing this game. I'm so excited. If this is your first time coming on to my game previews, or maybe it's been such a long offseason you've forgotten how these run, we'll go through the series history between Boise State and USF. There isn't any, but I will have a little bit something different in that section here today. We'll go through key players for both Boise State and USF. So, hey, any Bulls fans, there's stuff in here for you as well. And I want you to contribute, be part of this conversation, get that insight from the opposing fan base. And then we're going to have to go through the three keys of the game for Boise State, how they can beat USF here, and then my prediction, whether I think they will win, and that score prediction, which brings me to the most exciting part of any of my videos, which is the opportunity to interact with all of you. Just like last season, I'm going to be doing my score prediction challenge. And just like last year, whether you're a fan of Boise State or not, you can be part of that score prediction challenge. In the comments below, go and put your score prediction right now. Before you watch any more of the video, don't cheat, don't see mine. Go down, put your score prediction, any thoughts you have on the game, and then we can come back in afterwards and have a discussion at the end. I will go through and reply to every single person that comments on my video. Now, last year was awesome. Tons of engagement, and it's my favorite part. The whole reason I do this channel is because it gives me an opportunity, someone who doesn't have the privilege of living in Boise because of my job, gives me the opportunity to feel like I'm still connected to the fan base, and the comment section allows me to do that. So, my favorite part, to sweeten the pot here and reward you all for commenting, I've decided I did a partnership at the end of last season with Athletes Threads, and they made these amazing Ashton Jeanty jerseys. And I am going to decide this year the winners of every single week, the winners of the Score Prediction Challenge. I'm going to take down their names, and they're going to be entered into a raffle at the end of the year to win an Ashton Jeanty Boise State jersey. This one, in fact. So make sure that you go down. If that changed your mind, changed your score prediction, you go, man, I'm going to take this serious now. Go down, pause the video, put your score prediction in. Anybody can participate. The only requirements are that you like the video and that you are subscribed to the channel. So make sure you go put your score predictions. Okay, everybody good? Even if you don't want to win, that's fine. Just be part of the conversation, part of the process. Put your score predictions and let's get on. Okay, into the series history. As stated, this is the first time that Boise State has played USF. So there's no actual series history to preview, but this is a good opportunity to look back on how Boise State has fared playing in similar conditions, similar teams down in either the South or playing against American Athletic Conference teams when opening up the season. And there is some history there. Boise State overall, in their entire school history, is 6-4 playing games that actually played in the South. Not necessarily against Southern teams, but played against teams in the South. And Boise State has won 6 out of 4 of those. Those wins include teams like Georgia and Virginia Tech from the Kellen Moore days, and most recently beating Georgia Southern in last season's matchup. A very close game, but it was still a win for Boise State. Now, those 4 losses, some of those coming very early on in the program's history, including losses to South Carolina and Ole Miss. But recently, and this kind of leads into the second point of comparison here, losing to UCF. The last time they went down and faced an American Athletic Conference team for a season opener, playing UCF and losing that game. Very, very close game, a game that I got to go to, but a game that Boise State did not win. So that talks about how has Boise State compared against American Athletic Conference teams. Well, they haven't played a ton of them in the last 5 years. There is a little bit a longer history if you count teams that are no longer in the conference, especially you start looking at teams like Connecticut that got kicked out because they were so terrible. Please, Pac-12, do not add UConn Huskies. Anyhow, when you start looking at the comparison between the Mountain West and the AAC, it's very interesting, but not so much with Boise State because they've only played 2 American Athletic Conference teams in the last 5 years. However, both of those games, very, very close losses. As mentioned, the UCF loss in 2021 when Boise State went down and played, and then very memorably, of course, in 2023, Boise State losing against Memphis. Now, that was an opportunity to see Maddox Madsen step up, which takes us into the key players here. Boise State is going to want to try and reverse that trend of losing against AAC teams on the road. Not that it's much of a trend with only 2 games there, but they want to reverse that trend, and it's going to be very important that they do so. If Boise State wants any hope of getting to the CFP at the end of the year, starting off with a loss versus USF, and then have to go undefeated, which includes a game versus Notre Dame later on in the season, which is not going to be an easy one and one that Boise State's not projected to win. So Boise State has to start it off. And I will tell you, before we even get into any more of this preview, I am concerned about this USF program. They are not to be taken lightly, as you will find out as we go throughout this preview. But Maddox Madsen is going to be one of those players that gives Boise State an opportunity to get this win, to advance down their road to the playoffs with starting off one season first win here, and also allowing them to reverse that trend of losing American Athletic Conference teams early in the year. Maddox Madsen, of course, outstanding player. He 3,018 yards last season, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, a 62.4% completion percentage, and he was named the Mountain West Offensive Player, a preseason Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year. He's also got a running threat. Now, it's not something we want to see him out there doing because Boise State's quarterback depth is not very good right now, so prefer not to see him having to use his legs too much in this game, but if he needs to, he can. 221 yards rushing and 5 touchdowns on the ground last season. Now, one of the reasons that he hopefully won't have to use his legs this game is because of a running back named Sire Gaines for Boise State. You may not have heard of him yet if you're not a Boise State fan, but by the end of the season, you will be familiar with his name. Somewhat the heir apparent to Ashton Jeanty. Now, that's a lot to say, considering everything that Ashton Jeanty is. We will probably never see in all of college football in our lifetimes, very unlikely to see a player up to the level that Ashton Jeanty was. However, when you start talking about running backs that have a chance to step up and be that number 1 player for Boise State and competing at a high stage, there is a lot to like about Sire Gaines. I do think this is going to be somewhat of a running back by committee approach, something we'll talk about here later on in the video. However, Sire Gaines looks to be the most exciting threat. He is very, very healthy coming back from last year, had an injury that took him out early on in the season. He only had 156 yards rushing because he was out by the 3rd game of the season. But in those 3 games, or 2.5 games really, we saw a lot that flashed. We've seen a ton out of spring ball and fall camp that's excited us about Sire Gaines, and he looks better, healthier than I was predicting. If many of you remember early on in the season, I was predicting that Jean-Marie Dubar would probably step up just because I didn't expect Sire Gaines to be as healthy as he is coming back. He has blown away all of my expectations in that field. He looks 100% ready to go, and that should certainly be an area of concern for USF fans or anybody else that has to face Boise State, because this is a player, as a true freshman, as a 17-year-old, showed massive flashes. Now, a whole year to develop in the system, he's going to be an explosive talent. However, when you flip over to the defensive side, obviously, Boise State can't win this game on offense alone, especially going up against what should be a very good USF offense. You're going to need some strong defensive performances. And obviously, Boise State lost, just like they lost Ashton Jeanty. They also lose one of their main focal points on defense, being Ahmad Hassanin. Huge, obviously, focal point of that defense, drew so much of the pressure of the defensive schemes away to have to just game plan just for him. And that opened up opportunities from other guys to step up. Clearly here, as far as my key players of the game, Jaden Version Morgan. He had an incredible year last year, 40 tackles, 10 sacks, actually led the team in sacks. Now, it won't be as easy necessarily to repeat those numbers without Ahmad Hassan drawing as much attention away like he did last year, but he does look to be a player that's going to step up, and Boise State is going to need him to, especially when you're talking about a USF offense that's going to be relying on a quarterback who's coming back from an injury, but who is going to be an offensive attack that's certainly going to focus on the passing game. Pressure in the backfield, allowing a Boise State secondary to settle into some new roles is going to be key. Otherwise, going to the USF side of things, their key players are going to have a field day, and that starts with their quarterback, as previously mentioned here, in Byron Brown. He only had 836 yards passing last year, but similar side gains out very early on. By the 5th game of the season, he was out playing for them. So he didn't get to play much last year, but year prior, incredible season. He broke school passing yard records, over 3,000 yards passing, to be precise, over 3,200 yards passing, and a 64% completion percentage. If he can come back from injury at that same level in this system, he is going to be very, very dangerous. Now, he does lose a lot of weapons up front that he worked with in that 2023 season and for the time that he was playing last year. USF loses most of their top wide receivers from last season. To be exact, they only return out of players that had over 200 yards receiving. They only had returned 2 of those players, and they are losing a sum total here of 4 players that had at least 200 yards receiving last year, including their number 1 wide receiver threat. So who's going to step up in their place? Well, they have some guys coming over there with transfers from Tennessee, some of the guys that should step up, but I think that a player that you should keep your eyes on, a key player from them, is going to be their very tall 6'3", 212-pound wide receiver, Keyshawn Singleton, 428 yards receiving last year. Very much a deep threat, 15.9 yard average per touch and 3 touchdowns. I think you probably see him step up into a much bigger role this year and look to challenge that Boise State secondary. On the defensive side, we talked about the offensive power of Boise State. Well, USF is going to be leaning on their linebacker here, their number 1 returning tackler from last season, Mac Harris, 82 tackles, 4 sacks, and 8 tackles for loss. This is a player that Boise State leaning on that run game. They're going to have the passing game hugely involved as well, but they are certainly going to continue to lean on that running game, especially considering all of the offensive linemen that they have returning. Almost the entire unit from last season looks like it may be even better than last year. One of the key packages to stopping that is going to be here in Mac Harris. If USF has a chance of winning this game, they're going to need their defense, specifically under Mac, to stop the Boise State offense and get it into a late 4th quarter struggle. Now, for keys to the game for Boise State to win this one, the number 1 key, and it's going to be, I don't think one that's too surprising, is Madsen needs to step up. He has been a player who's been incredibly reliable for Boise State. Last year, his main role was to be a game manager. Ashton Jeanty was the offensive focal point, and all Maddox Madsen needed to do was not mess it up, manage the game, allow Ashton Jeanty to get the touches he needed, and then take advantage of the opportunities that the Boise State running game opened up. They just needed Madsen to manage. Well, now with Ashton Jeanty gone, you still have a lot of talent at running back room, but now Maddox Madsen needs to move from being a game manager to being a game weapon. Now, we've seen that in the past. As I talked about earlier, last time that we played Memphis, that first season for Maddox Madsen, he stepped up into those weapon roles. When Boise State was in clutch time and they needed someone to give them a chance, he came in strong. UCF at home for Boise State gave them a shot. There versus Memphis. Again, the Boise State was out of, brought them down, back-to-back scoring drives, had a chance to win that game. Should have won that game. Bad call on a running back that was not in prior, as a whole other story. But Boise State under Maddox Madsen, he has shown the ability to be that offensive weapon. Versus Penn State, he had tons of opportunities to step up and be that offensive weapon for Boise State. He is going to need to fulfill that role this year as the big playmaker, not simply the reliable game manager or awareness piece, which he is acknowledged as being elite in that. Even by a lot of his haters, he is seen as a player who does have great field awareness and field generalship. But not only does he need to do that, but he's going to need to stretch that field with his arm and actually be a piece of making those explosive plays happen, especially in an offense that looks to be emphasizing the passing game more. Now, that's a little bit intuitive. It's obviously going to emphasize it more than last year because you really can't get more run focus for Boise State than they were last season with Ashton Jeanty. When you have a player of his caliber, of course, you're going to shape your offense to his style. Boise State this year is going to go back to being more what we've traditionally seen out of Boise State, which is a balanced attack. The run-first team that builds that running game and then has those explosive plays over the top. But also Nate Potter has said that he wants to emphasize the passing game. When I got to talk with some of the incoming wide receiver recruits for Boise State, one of the things he talked about was that Nate Potter is emphasizing that passing game with them and talking about their roles in that offense. Nate Potter is acknowledged as a player who is an offensive genius. He is going to be much more creative with the system. It's something that Tyler Crow emphasized when he previewed the offense with me on the channel. You can expect this offense to be much more explosive, much more creative overall, but certainly in the passing game. But all of that rests on Max Matson being able to step up into not necessarily a new role, but a refined role within this offense where he needs to be able to be that explosive weapon for the offense as a whole. Now, the number 2 key is it's not all on Matson. The running game is going to be massive as well. And part of that, Boise State needs to identify who their top 2 running backs are going to be this year. Boise State, I don't think, is going to necessarily have one running back taking 90% of the carries like we saw last year. It's not the Boise State way. Even when you had Ashton Jeanty here before this last year, he and Helani was splitting those carries almost 50-50. And Boise State, even when they've had a number 1 running back, has traditionally had another running back that's not simply a change of pace, but a major part of that offense. Both of those players getting playing time in the backfield. There's a couple of rare exceptions. When we had Jay Ajayi, there really wasn't anybody that stepped up to that same level, so he took the majority of the carries. But traditionally for Boise State, you have one running back like a Alexander Madison and a Jeremy McNichols sharing that backfield and sharing that role together. So I think Boise State is going to look here to find 2 running backs that stand out of this 4-headed attack. I see a role for all 4 running backs in this game and in the offense as a whole for the whole season. John Ray Dubar, Dylan Riley, and then obviously, of course, the transfer from Fresno State coming in. All of those players are going to be huge, and Malik Sherrod, and then obviously, as previously mentioned already, Sire Gaines. All 4 of those players are going to be massive contributors to this offense. I think they're all going to have a role. Some will have more of a role in special teams, but I think all of them will have a role in this team and in this offense in certain play packages. But in this game, this is that opportunity early on in the season to translate what you've seen on the practice field and actually see what it looks like in real life, in real contact. It is so important for running back room to have that consistency. It's not as important as a quarterback room. Okay, you can still have a rotation. It's not like, you're going to have the same negative impacts of a quarterback rotation or 2-headed quarterback room like Boise State has seen in the past that we're never going to go back to. Please, never. But for a running back, it is still important to get into the flow of the game and develop that flow as you move throughout, getting used to the hits, using those hits to energize you, getting used to how the offensive line is working with the defense. Each defense is a living organism. They all work a little bit differently, and you start to recognize how those holes are developing and the defensive mindset as you play throughout that game. So Boise State needs to find those 2 top running backs that are going to be the focal points of this offense moving out the season. I think you'll see early on in this game probably something similar to what we saw in 2019 versus Florida State. We had Helani, Van Buren, and Mahone, all 3 of those running backs both getting playing time throughout the game, trying to see who was going to step up and show out. I think you'll see something similar in this matchup, though, of course, I think Sire Gaines leads that team. So I think you will see somewhat more of a rotation at running back in this matchup, but Boise State needs to quickly find early on in the season those top 2 guys that are going to be their main stalwarts in the offensive running back room, and then have other players like potentially a Jean Verdure, Dylan Riley, or it could be a Malik Sherrod and Dylan Riley. Depending on how it works out, they'll have packages, but you need to find your top 2 guys. And that leads us to our final point for Boise State, which is the secondary needs to prove it. USF is going to be very, very dangerous through the air. I think that was pretty well highlighted when talking about their key players. USF is a dangerous team. Now, luckily for Boise State, our secondary, which has been a negative. Just say it as it is. It has been a negative for several years for Boise State. Certainly one of the things the fan base has harped on year in and year out, showed massive improvement in the back end of the year. In the last 5 games of the year for Boise State, they didn't allow one single touchdown pass of greater than 25 yards, not including the Penn State game. But the last 5 games, the regular season, including the Mountain West Championship game, not one touchdown pass of over 25 yards. Every opponent was held to under 21 points in their matchups. And you clearly would look back and say that 3 out of those 5 games were won by the Boise State defense and primarily the Boise State secondary. And that was without Alexander Tubner for most of those games being injured on the back end of the season. So this Boise State secondary, not only did they show improvement, and not only have they moved from a unit that was a liability to a unit that was a contributor, now I think they're in a place to be a unit that is a position of strength. Actually, one of the focal points on this defense that causes them to be winners in these matchups as we go throughout the season. And I think they start off strong because you have, as far as returning players go, this is probably the strongest unit on the team simply based on returning players. Defensive line obviously loses some key pieces. The linebacker room is very much going to be new faces there. Ronnie obviously coming back strong, but the departure of Simpson, that is going to be very, very different looking. But the secondary overall is the same secondary that we saw last year. It's a secondary that showed massive improvement. You obviously lose Alexander Tubner, you lose Shea Oladipo. But aside from that, you get both of your starting cornerbacks back in Irby and McCoy. You have moving down to nickel, a player who is not new to the team. He had significant playing time at corner last year in Banks. And so while he may be new to the nickel spot, he is a veteran on this roster right now. And then for the safeties, Ty Benefield has longtime player for Boise State. Very, very exciting prospect. He's one of the fastest players on the team. And then also Washington, who because of Tubner's absence, got a lot of playing time at safety. So Boise State has a ton of experience in this unit. I think this is going to be one of the strongest units on defense this season. Starting off, they're going to get very heavily tested versus this USF offense. They cannot let themselves take a hit early and lose the game because of that. This is going to be a unit that's going to need to show that resiliency to overcome. I think you're going to see a second half performance from the secondary that's going to put Boise State in a position to potentially win this matchup. We'll get to the score prediction here in a moment, but potentially win this matchup. So while they may struggle a bit earlier because it's always hard as a secondary gelling early in the season, you do have some players, while veterans on the team, adjusting to new positions. I'm not saying it's going to be a hot start from the very beginning. I do think this is a secondary that by the second half has found its legs, and as we go throughout the season, they prove that improvement from last season wasn't simply a momentary improvement or a flash in the pan, but this is a secondary that has fundamentally changed how they're approaching this game, and they are returning to be one of those strong units that Boise State has always seen on their teams looking back in the past. So for Boise State, 3 keys: Maddox Madison stepping up. You need to identify your top 2 running backs, and the secondary needs to prove it. So when we look at this team, Boise State versus USF, this is going to be one of those very intriguing early matchups. Unfortunately, with USF, I don't think they're going to put themselves in contention for a playoff, not because they're not a significantly improved team, but just because of their schedule. After Boise State, they have to play Florida, Miami, and South Carolina. I don't know who put this schedule together, but somebody must have pissed them off when it came to the football program because they are looking to hurt some guys. This is a very tough gauntlet. It's a program that if they lose to Boise State, they could start off 0-4. I am sure that will motivate them to come in and be very dangerous in this matchup because they may be saying, hey, we're excited about our future. It's a program with a lot of aspirations, but they know what's ahead of them, and they know they need to start off hot. Both of these programs are feeling that same pressure, but USF especially, I think, is going to be dangerous in that aspect. It's also a USF program that is improving. I don't think that they're improving at the same level as some people would think they are. They're certainly not a team that should be looked at as a Power 4 expansion candidate, as I've talked about on this channel, but they are a program that's moving in the right direction. Their new head coach, well, I say new, he's been there for 2 years so far, has done a great job of doing all the right things to put this program back on track and make them competitive, which is not easy because he took over a program that prior to his arrival had 3 straight seasons of less than 2 wins. I mean, 2 of those were 1-win seasons. He took over that program, took them to back-to-back bowl games. Last year, despite the injuries to his star quarterback, still managed to get them back to 7-6. You may be looking at another 7-6 type of season this year just because of how tough this schedule is for USF, but do not be fooled. This is a much better USF program than we've seen in the past, even going back to last season. So USF is going to be dangerous. I do think Boise State holds the advantage here. Yes, USF is at home. Yes, it's going to be a program that is desperate to get this win, but Boise State is going to be returning a roster that I think is stronger than USF's, at least to start this season. primarily leaning on that offensive line. Offensive line for Boise State returning 4 out of 5 stars is huge. Having, I think, 9 players on the roster or that all have 7 starts. I may be messing up that stat a little bit, but they have a ton of players coming back that all have significant playing time and starting time at the offensive line. This is going to be one of the strongest units in the entire college football for offensive line, certainly when it comes to the non-power 4 teams. So for Boise State, that offensive line, massive advantage right off the bat. While other teams are having to figure out their passing game and get adapted to that, figuring out who's the number 1 wide receiver, developing those relationships, Boise State is going to be able to settle in behind his offensive line, provide the protection needed for the passing game to get into a rhythm, and more importantly, be reliable on offense behind that offensive line. The running back room is going to be explosive and I think strong in this matchup as well. So Boise State, I think, holds the cards on offense. Defensively, they are improving have improved in all of the right areas to counter this USF offense. Yes, I think that there will be growing pains early on in this game. Like I said, first half type of experience. But I think by the second half, Boise State's figured their things out on defense. Combined with a Boise State offense, I think is in a better position here to start the season. Again, primarily because of the offensive line and how strong that unit is for them. And a USF team that is going to have, yes, they've had all offseason to heal up at their quarterback position and redevelop those bonds there. But he's not like he's coming off of having played most of last year. There's going to be a little bit of rust there that he's going to have to knock off. And still, for a offense for USF that relies much heavier on the passing game, I think Boise State's offense is going to, that rust is going to play a much bigger role, especially when you don't have a clear-cut have those season-long bonds developed of a number 1 wide receiver like you have with USF. It's not even not having a number 1. You don't even have a clear stated number 2, number 3, number 4 type of wide receiver based on playing time. Potential, theoretical potential, but not necessarily on-field proven potential, other really than Singleton like we talked about early on. So for Boise State, I think Boise State does win this game. I think that they win this game because of a second half improvement by Boise State by more than what the spread is. I'm predicting right now Boise State 38, and USF 27. That's my final score prediction for Boise State versus USF. Please let me know in the comments below where you think I went wrong, if you disagree. But if you do, and even if you do agree, just have that conversation as well. What are your thoughts for this game? What are your biggest concerns? Where do you think Boise State has the most opportunity to show improvement? What are your excitements? I want to have all of that conversation with you in the comments below. So please get in there right now. Let me know your thoughts on this game. If you didn't put out a score prediction at the end, it's okay. You can go put a score prediction in now. You, of course, have my insight as well. But please put your score predictions, and I will go down below and have comments with all of you. And remember, again, the winner will receive, not the winner necessarily of this game as far as score predictions, but will be put into a pot to win at the end of the season this Boise State Ashton Jeanty jersey from Athletes Threads. And I'll put a link to their website as well. They're not officially sponsoring the channel this season, but they do great work and they have great products. So I'll put a link in the description as well. So thank you so much for watching. As always, make sure you subscribe. It's going to be a fantastic season to be a Boise State fan. Very exciting one. And I cannot wait to see what the future holds. Again, thanks everybody for watching all the way to the end. Make sure you subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue!